History is a science, but freed from the test tubes and theorems of her sisters, Cleo's boundaries are much more expansive. However, this very freedom can be her Achilles' heel. Freed from the paraphernalia of the hard sciences, history cannot always give definite answers, as the hard sciences theoretically can. And nowhere is this more clear than in reading historical book reviews. Jefferson's Nephews, A Frontier Tragedy by Boyton Merrill Jr. tells the story of the Lewis family, which was distantly related to the third president. An old but not elite Virginia family, the Lewises married into the Randolph and Jefferson families, but in 1808, disappointed with their fortunes in Virginia, a section of the family, led by Charles Lewis, moved to Kentucky. In 1811, two of his sons, Lilburn and Isham, murdered and dismembered a 17-year-old slave named George, and then hid his body in the chimney. When their crime became known, the two brothers made a suicide pact, but when Lilburn killed himself prematurely, Isham, losing his nerve, fled. The basic facts give the impression that the frontier tragedy is a cut-and-dried event in history, but in the hands of historians, the truth becomes quickly muddled. Donald Carmody, in his review, gives the same brief synopsis as I just have, but then proceeds to say that while Merrill's book is comprehensive, it is based largely on supposition and has more twists and turns than a mystery novel, the implication being that while it may be good enough for the average reader, it should not qualify as history. Patrick Furlong and Robert Macaulay, on the other hand, give much better praise to Merrill's book. Macaulay coming out and saying that it is a good book, while Furlong, while admitting that sometimes the details are a little excessive, says that Merrill keeps the story going at a good pace. Bertram Wyatt Brown goes even further, positing that the fact that Merrill is not a professional historian is actually a strong point, since freed from the assumptions and suppositions of the historical field, Merrill is actually able to inject some originality into his study. It is in the details of Merrill's book, however, that the reviews become truly fascinating. For example, Furlong in his review states that Jefferson had hardly any contact with his distant cousins, and that the crime became known when a neighbor found George's head. The first claim contradicts Macaulay, who said that Jefferson actually tried to monopolize the mill business, which had been on Charles Lewis's old land in Virginia. And the second claim contradicts all the other reviewers who said that it was the neighbors seeing a dog chewing on George's head that alerted them to the crime. Even more fascinating are the perspectives that the different reviewers bring onto Merrill's work. For Carmody, Lilburn and Isham are the villains, plain and simple. Macaulay, on the other hand, portrays Lilburn in a much more sympathetic light, detailing that his father, mother, brother, and wife had all died recently, leaving him in charge of the family surrounded by debt and needy family members. Furlong goes a step further, suggesting that Lilburn was actually suffering from a strain of madness, saying that 1811 was a year of strange omens. Some reviewers, such as Wyatt Brown and Furlong, use Merrill's narrative to burst the myth that owning land, as the Lewises did in Kentucky, guaranteed yeomanly virtue, while Furlong raises the point from the family's failure that westward expansion did not always guarantee the spread of democracy, such as Frederick Turner and other historians have posited. And some, such as Fawn Brodie, used the murder to assert that it was one of the most appalling atrocities of slavery. All of these divergent opinions lead to this old question: what can we actually know from history? About a year ago, a cousin of mine opined that we can't really know anything about history since we can't know what people in the past were thinking, and every historian has his own bias. But this view is far too bleak. If that were the case, then not only would it be impossible to know history, but there wouldn't be any historians. We would all be out of a job. Events did happen in history, and people were motivated by the same factors, pure and mixed, that people are today. To give the most truthful account of the past possible, we have to marinate our heads in the time and in the people we are studying, as David McCullough put it. And we must also remember that sometimes the best answer that we have is we don't know. And in such cases, contrary to what Carmody states, sometimes supposition is the best that we can get at.